start flowing in. Okay, let's get started. First, I want to take a minute to remind everybody that SPH Fertility is really here to support all couples dealing with fertility, pregnancy loss at any stage, and postpartum issues. From the moment you call us, you'll feel like you have someone who really understands you, is on your team, will move mountains to try and help you. We have so many projects and workshops coming up. So please watch out on Instagram, send us a DM, give us a call if there's anything you're interested in learning more about, if you need our services, or if you want to get involved. So now, on to PCOS, why everybody's here. It's such a complicated disorder. I personally find that the causes, the symptoms, the treatments are often very misunderstood. Patients bounce around between doctors, whether it's their regular OB or a fertility doctor or an endocrinologist, and even then they really have trouble understanding what's actually going on in their bodies. So tonight, that's why we have Dr. Jenna Tarosi with us. She's a fertility specialist at Columbia Fertility. And we have Sarah Sayeg, who's going to share her experience with PCOS and fertility. And she's one of our very own fertility volunteers, and she's a peer, and she helps so many people who are in similar situations as her. So we're very excited. We have a great night coming up. So you ready?
Let's do it. Yeah, thank you again so much for having me.
Okay. Okay, so us PCOS people, we assume everybody knows what we're talking about and what PCOS is, but we have so many great people who tune in, who really just want to learn to help other people and don't experience these things for themselves. So can you give us like a clear and concise description of what the disorder actually is?
That's maybe the hardest question of the night, because like you said in the beginning, it's complex, all right? But PCOS, what it is, it's a hormonal disease. So it affects your hormones, which can affect so many different aspects of your life. From a GYN perspective, it can affect your periods, and having an irregular period make it difficult to get pregnant. It can also affect your face, and you can get unwanted facial hair and acne. It also can increase your risk for things like diabetes and heart disease. So it's a hormonal disease that has all different effects on the whole body.
Okay, and are those really the key symptoms, or are there other symptoms that present themselves?
So the main reasons that people go to the doctors with these symptoms is it's all about like symptoms and what they're feeling. So when you're younger, a lot of times it's girls who are getting irregular periods, and then even after a couple of years after getting their first period, it's just not regular, like they're not getting a regular period. That would be a major kind of sign that maybe PCOS or something's going on. Other big factors that people tend to see is sometimes we see unwanted facial hair. That's a big kind of sign that there could be extra hormone of the extra testosterone.
Okay. And as a doctor, how do you diagnose it? How do you see it when patients come to see you?
First off, it's a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning I need to make sure that we're not missing something else. So we do some certain kind of blood work to see, is there any other kind of hormonal disease that could be going on that be causing these symptoms? It's about taking like a really good history and getting to know the patient in front of you to kind of hear what they've been through. What were their periods like when they first got it in high school or middle school? What were their periods like in high school? Have they been on birth control pills? What has it done for you? It's really just kind of getting a good history to see what they've been through. We usually do some blood work too, like I said, to kind of confirm what those hormone levels are, make sure we're not missing anything else. And then as a fertility doctor, I'm doing a lot of ultrasounds too to look at the ovary itself and to see what that ovary looks like.
And what do you see differently on an ovary?
So PCOS, first off, let's like unpack like the name of PCOS. All right, so it stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. I hate the name, to be honest, because polycystic makes you think everyone who thinks, oh, I have so many cysts on my ovaries. And it all kind of goes back to like medical history of when it was first described, like the 1930s, when they saw these ovaries had really big. And so they had a lot of what they call little cysts, so they called it polycystic. But really, these little cysts that we're seeing on the ovary, they're follicles. Now, follicles are normal to have. Every woman, if you're not on birth control, you're going to grow one follicle a month. That follicle is going to have an egg in it. You ovulate, you release that egg, and that's potentially how you get pregnant. So all women have follicles on their ovaries. With PCOS, you have a lot of follicles. So when I do an ultrasound, I see a lot of follicles on there. These follicles are all making the extra hormone, so that's kind of why you can get these symptoms of PCOS. So instead of calling it PCOS, I wish it was called like polyfollicular disease. I think that'd be more accurate. But really, it's just about all the different follicles making all those hormones.
Okay. And we posted a question box, and we got a ton, just for some advertisement and get a little excitement. And we wanted to hear about what people were really interested in knowing with this topic. And the biggest question we got was about weight. So we wanna ask you, how is weight affected by PCOS? Is it affected? Because from my understanding, it's not always. I would love for you to explain that. How is weight affected by PCOS?
Yep.
If you can dive into the nutritional part, like what role does nutrition play, diet? We had a lot of questions about exercising, supplements, certain food sensitivities. If you could go into a deep
PCOS,
conversation
it's not
about that.
simple. As you guys, if you have PCOS, we kind of realize it's not like a simple box here. It's a spectrum where people who have PCOS are going to have different symptoms and they're going to present differently. And weight could be a part of it for some people, and for some people, it's not. So having PCOS, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be overweight or have a higher weight. There's definitely, you can have PCOS and still be on a lower BMI and a normal weight. Or you can have PCOS and you can be overweight. There is a connection between those hormones and how your body's processing insulin and having a higher risk of insulin resistance. So we do see more overweight in PCOS. And when that's the case, so not always, but when you have PCOS and you're overweight, it's kind of this unique scenario where they are both working against each other. But it's also a unique opportunity where if you can work on the weight, you can actually improve some of those PCOS symptoms. So that's why it's a great question why people are so interested in exercise and diet, because it is something that you can do yourself. You don't need a doctor prescribing medicine or anything to kind of work on those healthy lifestyle things. But it's just also important to realize that it's not all about weight too. So you can be a total normal BMI and have PCOS, or you could be overweight and not have PCOS. So it's a spectrum.
So when someone is insulin resistant, do you find that there's a certain type of food lifestyle that helps them?
It's a lifestyle.
Or is
it means like, what are things that it's not like a fad diet. It's not going to be something that you can only do for 2 weeks and then you lose the weight and then you put it back on. It's really about finding that lifestyle that works for you. And it's hard. Like anybody who's tried to lose weight knows it's not easy. So it's really about finding what works for you in your lifestyle. There's not one particular diet that's better than another. I think a lot of it from my end is just about calories in and calories out, like how much you're eating and how much you're exercising. They've looked at having the low carbohydrate diets versus a higher fat diet. There's some idea that definitely low carbohydrates are sometimes better if you have any of that insulin and diabetes risk. But there's not one diet that's going to be better to lose weight than another. Yep.
So it's trial and error. Okay. And again, guys, by the way, I forgot to add, we will be having a Q&A at the end. So if we don't answer things as clearly as you were hoping for, or if we forget something, or if you have extra questions, please put them in the question box and we will hopefully get to everything. I forgot to say that in the beginning. I'm sorry. Okay, so the next question I wanted to ask you, is there any correlation between PCOS and
Yeah, definitely. We definitely see that patients with PCOS, there's higher rates of anxiety and depression with patients that have PCOS. Now, whether or not that's the PCOS symptoms, like are they're overweight or problems getting pregnant, we know just having problems getting pregnant also increases your risk of anxiety and depression. So we don't really know why there's a higher correlation between anxiety and depression and PCOS, but we definitely see it. Anxiety and depression is also just so common and something nobody should be ashamed about or anything. So I definitely think it's important to,
Yes.
talk to your doctor about it, talk to your friends about it. It's probably more common than you realize. You
Do they talk to you
it's so
about
funny
it
because
when
I
they
always
come?
ask like any medical problems and like people are like, no, no. And I'm like, well, what about anxiety, depression? They're like, oh, yes, yes. And I'm like, that's a medical problem, So I think sometimes it's asking the right questions.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about we get a lot of questions from
Mm-hmm.
moms of teenage girls. When should PCOS symptoms, if they notice them, when are they alarming? At what age do you start doing a workup on younger girls? At what age would
Mm-hmm.
you consider diagnosing a younger girl? And is there anything that they could do? Do you have any type of protocol for that
Mm-hmm.
teenage
Sure.
stage with
I
PCOS?
hate labeling anybody with PCOS as an adolescent. There's a lot of overlapping symptoms. So the symptoms of PCOS, of having an irregular period and having extra symptoms of testosterone like acne, those are common things when you're a teenager. When you first get your period, you're not going to have a regular period for the first couple years. It can be irregular. Also, unfortunately, acne is a big part of a lot of teenagers' lives. So it's really kind of hard to give that diagnosis there. So when you're a teenager, I think it's really all about the symptoms. So if the irregular periods are bothersome, meaning that they can get really heavy when you've gone months without a period and then they get a really heavy period, that would be something that could be alarming, especially if it's a really, really heavy period. So as soon as you're getting like bothered by those symptoms of an irregular period, just talk to a GYN. Doesn't mean that they have to give you the diagnosis of PCOS, but it does mean they can start treating that irregular period.
How would
Yeah,
you go
birth
about
control
treating that?
really is kind of the number one thing. It definitely helps in many ways. It controls the period, meaning that you then just have this medical period every month type of thing. Also, that period becomes a lot lighter, and it can also decrease the extra testosterone symptoms that you're having.
What age would you consider putting
So
a
after
young
they
girl on
get their
birth
period,
control?
so, after you get your period, if the symptoms are bothersome, that's when I would consider it. I mean, there's also many other reasons to go on birth control for the actual contraception. So, if you're sexually active, that'd be obviously another reason. But if the irregular periods are bothersome, that would be a reason to go on a birth control.
And do you
No,
use
yeah,
any
good.
other
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you use any other
So not
medications with this
everybody
age
can
group?
take a birth control pill. Birth control pills have hormones in it. They have a hormone estrogen and progesterone. And there might be different medical reasons why you can't be on a estrogen kind of pill. So there are other hormonal pills that just have progesterone in it. So that might be, a good, kind of medication for a person. So it's really kind of person dependent from there.
Okay. And just as a doctor, if you could like give a piece of advice to a mom if she's starting to see and be concerned with these symptoms, what kind of doctor should she
Yeah,
take
your
her daughter to
GYN.
first?
So, as soon as any, female gets a period, they should start seeing a GYN who can really kind of help them walk through the diagnosis of PCOS and do any kind of workup that if it's needed from there. And then if they have questions still, that's when they can kind of refer to more of a specialist, whether or not it's on the endocrine side, like a pediatric endocrinologist or a fertility endocrinologist. I think your GYN is kind of the first spot in that adolescent world. Pediatricians might also be helpful too. If you have a good relation with your pediatrician, they can also sometimes kind of deal with these issues as well.
Okay, thank you. So the next thing we really want to move on to is obviously PCOS and fertility. So my first question is, let's get this out of the way because this was a very big question that was asked. Can people with PCOS conceive naturally? Do you always have fertility issues
No.
when you have
Oh, you can
PCOS?
you
Let's
can
clear that up.
definitely conceive spontaneously, whether you meant to or not. So, like, you can definitely, and that's why I hate also labeling anybody with PCOS too, and then they're gonna think, oh, I'm gonna have trouble getting pregnant, and that might not be the case at all. So you don't always need the extra help from a fertility specialist if you have PCOS, but sometimes you do. And so I definitely feel like anybody who has an irregular period deserves to see a fertility specialist who wants to conceive. Doesn't mean though we have to start with actual any kind of treatments. It's just kind of talking about what symptoms to look for, how to look for ovulation, and then we can talk about what treatments there are if they're needed.
Well, after tracking ovulation and everything, what would be the next step you take if someone's
Yeah.
having trouble
So
conceiving with
first, it's kind
PCOS?
of looking at an overview of the whole lifestyle, and weight is a big component there. So if it is something where you're overweight, that overweight can sometimes be affecting your menstrual cycles. So sometimes by doing more lifestyle interventions with diet and exercise, that can sometimes restore your cycles, sometimes where you start ovulating and having a regular period. And I always say start small. Just try to lose like 5 to 10% of your body weight, which is still a good number too. That's
That's
yeah. I
much
was like, I'm
harder to
not saying
do.
that's small.
You
I
made that
know,
sound
but I
easy.
don't want people to think I need them to lose 50 to 100 pounds. That just seems overwhelming and monumental. But sometimes really just like 5 pounds or 10 pounds over a couple months, that could be what it takes to start getting a regular period. So sometimes it's really first those lifestyle things. If weight is not a factor or you've tried the weight already, the next kind of step of things is usually an oral medication. There's different oral medications out there. Letrozole and Clomid are the two most popular ones. Those are oral medications that we use to help you ovulate, help you release the egg. Because if you're not releasing an egg, then you're just not getting pregnant.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then take a step further
Yeah,
than that after those things. What
yeah,
would be the
exactly.
next
So
step in your
first thing to
protocol?
realize, and I think this is the most frustrating part, is it doesn't always work on the first try. And it's always frustrating because you're like, okay, I'm
Okay.
here, we're doing the medicine, we're doing it, I'm gonna get pregnant this month, and it doesn't happen. That unfortunately is just common. You take a perfect egg, perfect sperm. Every month, just a naturally fertile couple only has about a 20% chance of getting pregnant each month. So by giving you that oral medication, I'm
Wow.
kind of helping you towards that normal fertile couple, but your chance of getting pregnant is still 20% that month, maybe a little bit lower. So first it's just realizing this is a long process. We're going to do it again and we're going to do it again. So sometimes it's like 3 to 6 months of doing this kind of oral medication. Still,
That
it
sounds
is.
so
Well, then anybody who's
frustrating.
tried to get pregnant and didn't get pregnant the first month knows it's frustrating. Like it's frustrating. Um, but then if it hasn't worked, there are other more aggressive therapies like IVF that are more successful. I don't like to jump to it because it's more aggressive. It's shots, ultrasounds. We're kind of taking the eggs out. We're then mixing them with sperm in a lab to make an embryo, much more scientific and kind of Jetsons medical stuff, but it's more successful. So if those oral medications don't work, a lot of times that next kind of step is something like IVF.
Okay. So the next question we want to go over is, can PCOS go
Mm-hmm.
away on its own or be cured? Like some things go away after pregnancy and natural childbirth and things like
Goes
that. Do
away.
you ever find like PCOS
Yeah.
ever just disappears
There's
in a
definitely a
patient?
lifelong kind of progress from there, meaning that going back to like what PCOS is and this polycystic or polyfollicles, lots of follicles, as we get older as women, we're going to lose those follicles no matter what. So as we're getting older, we're losing a number of follicles. So if you started out with a really high number of follicles with PCOS, as you get older, that number is going to decrease. So as we get older, just naturally, those symptoms of PCOS are going to get less. So sometimes that just kind of coincides with after you give childbirth. So it might not be the actual childbirth that changed things, But just as you age, sometimes the symptoms of PCOS change. Also, your body weight's going to change throughout your lifetime too. So sometimes by losing weight, that could also kind of decrease your symptoms of PCOS.
And are there any medications or trying to think of the right word. Are there any protocols or
Interventions and things?
treatments? I don't
Yeah.
interventions, yes. That people kind of like lifelong until menopause to help me sustain status
Yeah,
quo.
I
I don't know.
think
I'm
it's
not
no, I
using the
think
right
it's just
words.
about
Help
the
me.
symptom that you're having and then treating it. So, like if it's all about your periods, then it's kind of about the birth control and making sure that you have a period at least every 3 months or things. So, I don't want, if you're not trying to get pregnant, and you don't care, about ovulating or anything, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be on something to make sure that you're protecting your uterus. And so to protect your uterus, a birth control pill would be something that could do that. There are other options too, but you want to protect the uterus. And then also there's that risk of diabetes and insulin resistance. So by checking, different blood work like a hemoglobin A1C or doing like a glucose tolerance test, if you have signs of diabetes, there are medications that sometimes can be helpful if those lifestyle interventions haven't worked. Metformin is a big one. Metformin used to be.
Oh, we got a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
questions. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we
Mm-hmm.
got a lot of questions about metformin. So tell everybody, if you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
what metformin is, why you use it, how it
Yeah,
helps,
so it's
things
an
like
oral
that, please.
medication, and it helps the way the body processes sugar. So you think of PCOS having a higher risk of insulin resistance and how the body's processing sugars. Metformin can kind of help with that. So it's been studied, it's been around for numbers of years and has been used for all the different symptoms of PCOS. So it's been used to regulate your periods, to get pregnant, diabetes. It's been used in different trials for years and years and years, which is why people talk about it a lot. I think it's helpful if you have some insulin resistance. So if your body needs a little help processing the sugars and lifestyle interventions haven't cut it, that's when I got to go towards the metformin. They used to use metformin just to try to help you ovulate and regulate your periods. I think there are better options today than metformin for that. But definitely, if there is any kind of insulin resistance, metformin is usually our number one go-to, especially if you're trying to get pregnant, because it's safe during pregnancy too.
And for after pregnancy, when people are done having children, is it like a good maintenance
It
type
can
of
it can be if you
um,
need it. Yep, it can be.
drug?
Also, if anybody who started metformin, they might know it's not always that easy. There's a lot of GI side effects too when you start it, so it's not like the best medication sometimes. But sometimes,
Tell everybody
yeah, there's
what
a
a
lot of
GI side
diarrhea
effect
going on, and like, yeah, so it's not
is.
pretty. So I really, when they started, I'm always saying go slow and low and slow. Like we start small. If you're having issues, back it down and just like slowly increase it from there. But it can be really helpful for some women. Maintaining their sugar levels and maintaining a weight can sometimes be helpful.
Okay. Okay. So I see the questions. We have a lot of questions. I'm gonna hold them all till the end. Um, and then we're gonna talk to Sarah first. And hopefully everyone stay on, hang on. Sarah's gonna go through her story and then we'll get to the questions. So
Of
Sarah,
course. Of
thank you for
course.
waiting and being
Thank
so
you.
patient. You're the best. Um,
Okay.
Start us on your journey with PCOS. Tell us
Okay.
about your earliest
So I
symptoms.
get my period, seventh grade science fair, very fitting. I'm a woman, right? My, yes. I
Were
was in the
you in
science
school?
fair,
Were you in school?
Flatbush, middle tables, trifold, the whole thing. I go to the
You had to go
bathroom,
to the
I have
test.
my period. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay. Fun,
I
fun,
would
fun.
say my whole teenage years, I have periods, not regular. I was never one to like keep track of them, like writing them down, but I knew they were not regular. Like I was not getting them every 28 days or every 35 days. I would skip a month. I would not skip a month. They were always heavy and they were always longer. Like they were minimum 5 to 7 days.
I want to interrupt you for 1 second. Dr. Tarosi, can you describe us a regular
Oh,
cycle
sure.
versus an irregular
Yeah, so
cycle,
once
please?
you have regular cycles, which really might not happen until 2 or 3 years after you get your first period, but once you have a regular cycle, they define regular is every 21 to 35 days, but it's really just meaning that you know it's coming like in that month. So a lot of women aren't tracking it unless they're trying to get pregnant. But by regular periods, they just mean it's happening every month. And an irregular period is it's not happening every month. So it's hard. Like, you don't know, am I carrying a tampon or pads today? Like, you don't, it could be any time. It's kind of scary. Yeah.
I leave them in my car. Don't ask. I have an irregular
So
period.
no, not at all.
Okay,
So
go, Sarah. I'm
my
sorry.
whole teenage years are just irregular periods, the way you were saying, but always heavy. When they did come, they were always heavy and they were always longer. Like I was always envious of people that were like, oh, I had my period for 3 days. Was never me, ever. Fast forward to I'm 19. I'm working in the city. I'm after high school. I get my period one day and it was heavy. It was like starting off regular, but it was getting heavier. Usually by day 4 or 5, I feel like it's starting to maybe wind down, whatever. No, it's getting heavier. I remember I'm riding the train to work one day. Let's say I left the house with a clean pad. I get to my office 45 minutes later. It's like soaked through, like not to be whatever, but like clots.
Murder scene.
So very, very like something is up. I come home. I remember like telling my mom. She's like, we always have heavy periods. I'm like, no. I'm telling you, this is different. A couple days, like I would say, like maybe like we just kept saying we'll wait it out. A couple days go by. I'm white. We're going to the doctor. I go to the doctor. He's like, how are you sitting here right now? Get to the hospital. You need a blood transfusion. Like you are not okay. Very weak. I ended up getting a blood transfusion. It was crazy. It was just so like, what? Whatever. I never went to an OB at this point. So now I went from never going to an OB to being in a hospital. You know, my mom's calling her OB. Can you come see her? This is the story or whatever. So he comes to visit me. He's like, you know what? Let's handle this. Come to the office Monday when, whatever. I go to the office. We start like doing tests, sonograms, blood work, all that stuff. He's like, by the way, you have PCOS. I'm like, okay. What do I do? He's like, I'm going to put you on birth control and it should regulate it. This won't happen again. He didn't say that the like hemorrhaging and all that stuff. He didn't say it was from the PCOS. It was kind of like this weird thing happened, but we're going to put you on birth control and it should regulate your cycles and this won't happen again and whatever. I'm like, okay, we'll do it. Like, we'll do it. Maybe like a question here and there about the PCOS, but I really didn't think about it at that time. Like I was 19. I wasn't like thinking about it. It was like, okay, I just want this over and I want to move on with my life, you know?
Did you have any weird feelings about
Not really, to be honest. I really didn't think it was a big deal. I'm trying to think, like, I'm sure I had a couple friends on the pill also. Maybe like some people were like starting to get married like it wasn't a big deal, to be honest. I think my mom was like, oh, birth control. But then like, I feel like it's the doctor's like, this is all you could do. It's like, okay, like this is it. Like, what's there to argue about? We don't want this happening.
Right.
Like yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Mom.
So I go on the pill. So whatever, I'm on the
Let's move
pill.
on.
No, it's okay. So I'm on the pill. Life goes on. I get married at 23. I made a comment. Okay. I want to have a kid.
You want to have a kid?
I told my husband, like I felt, I'm very instinctive also, by the way, like not for anything. I always just said, I feel like it's not going to be so easy. Maybe let's just get off, like after a couple months, I'm like, let's just get off the pill. Like, I don't want to be on it anymore. Like, let's just see what happens. I don't want to be on the pill. And you know, there's so much,
you are very intuitive. I like, we're not such good friends. I mean, I love you, but you know, we're not, but I noticed just from chatting with you, over the last few days about what we want to talk about and the message we want to give, I did notice you are very in tune with your body and you are a very intuitive person. So I want to
thank you so much. Thank you so much for recognizing that. Yes.
You are
So
welcome.
I just
Validation.
was very like, okay, this is the situation. Let's get off and whatever. Okay. So a few months go by and I get off the pill, by the way, and I don't have a period. Like it never came. I'm like, okay, whatever. In the beginning of your marriage, you're like, wow, I'm not Nita. Like, this is great, you know? You don't think about it. Then after a couple months, I'm like, how am I going to get pregnant if I'm not having a period? So I remember I called my OB. By the way, besides intuitive, I advocate for myself. I'm also pushy.
Yes. Okay, well, that's why we want to teach everybody all of this because
Yes.
it's easier to advocate for yourself when you
Yes.
learn about certain topics.
Yes.
It's
That's
not
what we
So,
want everyone to
cheat.
get at.
Ask to see your doctor either.
Go.
It's a good thing.
yes, I was very, whatever. So, anyways, I call my doctor, whatever I want, like, I'm not getting my period, da da da. He's like, you know what? You're only off the pill for 3-4 months. It takes the time for your body to regulate. If you don't get a period by whatever, maybe he needs like another couple months, call me. Like, or after the holidays, call me or whatever. I'm like, okay. Knowing in my head that I'm going to call him back, but whatever. So time goes by, like the time goes by. I'm very also like, I'm counting down. I'm waiting to make the phone call again. I call the doctor. Hi, I need to come in. I still didn't get my period and whatever. Make an appointment. I go in. He tells me, okay, we'll give you Provera. It's a pill that induces a period, and then we'll give you Clomid, and you'll take it day. I don't even remember like the details, but you'll take it with X day on Provera, and let's try.
Dr. Tarosi, that was the
Exactly.
medicine you
Yep,
mentioned,
exactly.
right? The Clomid? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So
Everything
here we
you
see
said,
it
by
all
the
go
way,
into
doctor,
place.
was like the trajectory of my life.
Okay.
So I take Clomid. I remember also buying ovulation sticks, and like I wanted to see for myself if like, am I really gonna ovulate on this? Like the few months also, by the way, the few months that I was off the pill and like waiting for a period, the doctor had given me like had said something when I called, like, you don't necessarily need a period to get pregnant because technically I don't know, whatever. He was like telling me something. So I'm like, he's like, it could happen. I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy these ovulation sticks and maybe use them randomly. And whatever. They were always showing that I was not ovulating. So now that I was on the Clomid, I'm like, I want to see if I'm really going to ovulate on this. So the first month I did I remember seeing that I ovulated. So I was very excited. It was like the first movement that I had in a while. And I ended up not getting pregnant. I go back to the doctor. I'm like, okay, this is the story. He's like, okay, no problem. We'll do it again. I said, okay. I do Provera again. I do Clomid again. This time I was checking and I did not ovulate on it. And I remember telling him, like, I didn't ovulate. I checked. He's like, you know what? You did it 2 times. It's really, like, it's time for you to see a specialist because, like, at this point, if you're not ovulating on it, like, you probably need to do things a little bit more aggressive. And I'm going to send you on your way to a fertility doctor. Yeah.
So you left a regular OB, right? And went
Yes.
to a fertility doctor, like Dr.
I'm just going to make one
Good.
comment. This is so important that you were talking about those ovulation predictor kits and like those like strip things. Sometimes with PCOS, they don't work, sometimes they can just always be positive because they're
Interesting.
detecting a hormone called LH. So for some women, it's just going to give you a positive every time. So people are like, they're like, I got my period, but I have a positive. So just so you know, they don't work for everybody. So if anybody is at home and being like,
that is
why is this
so
not
good to
working
know.
with those hormones, that can make it out of whack. So.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's so good to know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So I go to a fertility doctor. I tell him the whole situation. He does a lot of tests, like more testing, like checking my tubes and more blood work and thyroid, all that stuff. We did like more extensive testing. He's like, I really want to put you on metformin. He's like, before we do anything, I want to see if we can induce a natural period because like I really haven't had one in a long time. And even like those Provera periods were not real periods. He's like, I want you to try it again. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm giving you metformin. I want you on a little bit of a healthier lifestyle. Like, let's try to lose a little bit of the BMI, like lower your BMI, whatever. I said, okay. I'm on it I think I gave myself also like 2 months. And then I'm like, if it's not,
Intuitive, she knows it's going.
yeah, I was like, if this is not going to work after 2 months, I'm calling it back. Whatever.
From a medical perspective, was that
Everyone's
long
different,
enough?
Some people are coming to me in a month. It's okay.
Right. So because I'm so intuitive, I remember the week, like, I'm not kidding. I want to say I ended up like, whenever I go on the metformin, you're right, very bad stomach issues. I also like it curbed my appetite. Yes, curbed
GI
my appetite. So like I was able to lose a little weight. I was exercising a little bit. Like I was really like, let me do what I have to do. I think it was like the 8th week, and I remember telling my husband, I'm like, okay, if I don't get my period this week, I'm calling the doctor because no. I got my period maybe a day later. I'm like, okay, Hashem, that's it. We're doing this. Like I'm on the right track. I call my doctor back. I call my doctor back. I tell him, he's like, okay, great. You have a natural period. Maybe like try for, like let's just see. Like you're probably ovulate, whatever. I think I gave it a little bit time because like I was excited that I was finally able to have a period after so long. So like, in your head, you're like, okay, maybe this is it, whatever. Doesn't work. I don't get pregnant for a couple months. I go back. He's like, okay, let's try IUIs right now. So at this point, they were like, everything, my husband did testing, everything looked normal. He was like, like, everything is showing that an IUI should work for you. Like you're young, you're healthy, you lowered your BMI, okay, you're on peace.
Wait, Doctor.
Oh, yes.
For people who don't know what an IUI is, just give us a very
so
brief
IUI stands for
description.
intrauterine insemination, which is a fancy term to say we put the sperm in the uterus. So I feel like you're putting the players a little bit further down the field to where they'd go.
So I'm like, okay, let's do it. We do the first IUI. I come home, my feet are up for like 24 hours. I'm not moving, thinking, like the sperm is swimming, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Totally, like I'm
gravity.
I'm doing it. I don't get pregnant. I'm very upset, obviously. I go back to the doctor, like, we got to do this again. Oh, maybe if you want to wait. I'm like, no, I'm ready. Like, let's do this again. I do an IUI again. I'm so like, everyone kept telling me like, it really should work for you. Like everything is pointing in the direction that it should work. So I really had my hopes up. I felt whatever. I do the IUI. I don't get pregnant. I'm very, very upset, obviously.
So what's the next step that the doctor
they were kind of like pushing me to maybe like do another IUI, like try again. I'll be honest, I just, again, intuition felt like it's not for me. I just felt like in my gut, like that's not going to be the way I get pregnant.
Was it also intuition,
I think
frustration?
It was both because so much time had passed and it's hard, like you see your friends, you see people building families, you're surrounded by it, you're in that age, everybody's like asking, watching, like it's hard. It's very hard. And I know IVF is like a very heavy word. I never had that fear of it. I don't know. Like, I know it's very different for everyone. Like for me, I just associated with like, this is going to give me the utmost chance to get pregnant, and I was very laser focused on getting there. So I was like, I'm going to do what I have to do. So for me, like I remember telling the doctor, like I want to do IVF. He's like, you could really try another IUI. I'm like, I'm already on the medication, and I'm already like doing half the protocol. Like I just want to take it there. He's like, okay, like I respect that. So we start the IVF journey. I mean, it's hard. It's not easy, but again, I'm laser focused. I just want to, like, I was really like nuts. Like, I was really like, calendar, I have a doctor's appointment Tuesday in 2 weeks. Okay, I got to make it to these 2 weeks. And then step 2, and then I'm going to do the shots on this day. Like, it was crazy. It was really, and I had a full-time job, and it was hard. Like I was waking up very early. I was running to the city. I was doing the blood work. I would go to my office. I had to do the Avidrel shot, refrigerated in my bag, put it in the mini fridge in the office. By the way, it's funny. Like I worked with my husband for like a lot of years. So I would be like texting him like, could you come to the bathroom for a second? Like, like he's giving me the shot. Like it was crazy. Like now looking back, like at the time it was go, go, go. And I was just, I'm going to do what I have to do. But like, I'm looking back, it was really crazy.
you find the extra
Yeah,
strength when
you
you're
definitely
in the
do.
situation, right? The
You
extra
just,
you
yes, you
the
do what you have to do.
motivation.
And I really always had the emunah, like not in a cheesy way, not in a whatever. I really was just always like, I just had faith that it was going to
You
happen.
had faith.
I really had faith it was going to happen. It's like, let's do what we have to do. Like, okay, let's just do it. So I do IVF the first time. Well, I do the egg retrieval, whatever, fine. I had to wait a little bit to do an embryo transfer because I overstimulated, whatever. It's like, every setback, you're like, oh, but there's an end goal. I have embryos and whatever. I am gearing up to do the embryo transfer. I do it. I'm resting. I'm taking it easy. I'm bloated. I'm this. You know how like the 2-week wait is like torture. But again, I had a feeling like I was pregnant. I was. So I get pregnant. I'm so happy. I'm like, I can't believe it. It's like, that's it. This is my time. Whatever. So fast forward. I go to a high risk, like in the middle of all this, like I changed practices. I was going to like high risk doctors. I had told them I had done IVF. They're like, of course. So like I was coming in like maybe extra 2 to 3 weeks instead of extra 4 weeks. Like I really felt like I was being so taken care of in that pregnancy, and like by the practice, they were on top of it. And again, like because I'm nuts and I was always just like reading things, whatever. Like I always felt like equipped and like I felt like in control and whatever. Okay. Fast forward, I ended up having a late loss at 19 weeks. I know. Yeah.
Oh, that's so
So
hard.
that
Did you have to
really,
tell everybody that you
like,
weren't pregnant anymore?
that was
That's the
really like the
worst.
hardest thing was like unannouncing pregnancy, you know?
Right.
Okay, I'm good. Yeah.
It's okay.
So whatever. But
You take a
anyways,
minute.
I like whatever. It ended up being like, of course, like only these things happen to me, like the one off fluke. It's like how this happened, whatever. I ended up finding out I had an issue with my cervix. So I had something called an incompetent cervix that basically like when I went for my 16-week checkup, they measured my cervix. Everything was fine, but over time, like because your cervix is not stable, it ends up shrinking. So, I'm sorry.
You made me
Like
emotional.
I talk about it so much and I'm fine, and then like it hits you out of nowhere. Like
Sorry. Oh my gosh.
I
I'm
know, because
trying
how many times did I talk
not
about
to
it with
tear
you and
up.
I'm just like, so whatever. So I ended up finding out I had an issue with my cervix. Yeah. They told me like it's not common, but we know about it, we can handle it. And you know what? There's so much technology these days. Like next time you're pregnant, we do this thing. It's called a cerclage. They basically stitch up your cervix when you're like 13 to 14 weeks, like preventative. And it basically it's literally like a needle sewing you up and like holding in the pregnancy. What? It was like wild. And they said like you don't usually know that you have this issue until like you have a loss like this, or they catch your cervix being short so early, but they don't usually measure for short cervixes when you're early, So it was a crazy thing. Okay. I have a DNA to remove the pregnancy. And then again, with speaking of intuition, I ended up having 2 DNCs after that DNA because they never like cleaned out. Like there was still like, because the pregnancy was a little bit further along, like there was still tissue all the way that they had to clean out. So after I had the first DNC, they're like, okay, you'll probably be bleeding for like 4 to 6 weeks or whatever. After that, it should go away. After 6 weeks, I'm still spotting, and I'm like, something is wrong. Like this is not right. I go back to my doctor. They do like a couple tests, whatever, sonograms. They're like, we really don't see anything. They ended up doing a sonohystogram. That's like when they put the tube with like the water to make sure your tubes are clear, whatever. There's a little piece of tissue in the back. We have to go back in, do another DNC, clean it out. Whatever. So I do what I have to do. I do it again. I was still, whatever. I'm still bleeding again. Like there was like a little piece they didn't remove. My fertility doctor ended up finding it. Whatever. Okay. The whole time that this is happening, I'm like, tell me when I can do IVF again.
You just wanted to
my husband is like, you have to breathe for 4 seconds. I'm like, no, do you know how much time is being wasted on this? Like, when can I try again? Like, I know I got pregnant now that like I did IVF the first time. It's like I knew this was like a fluke situation. I was like, I know I can get pregnant. I want to do this again. I had to wait a little bit. Okay, whatever. We're like, okay. Yes.
So let's move on to
I
the
do
next
IVF
time you do
again.
IVF. What happened?
I ended up having a chemical pregnancy. So I tested positive on a stick. I went for the blood work. They told me it shows that you're pregnant. You come back every couple of days to do blood work. My numbers were lowering instead of doubling. I'm like, okay, this is like not cool. Yeah, such a buzzkill.
That's such a
I'm like,
buzzkill.
no, we're going back. Like, we're doing this again. Again, I have to wait a little bit. I end up doing IVF a third time. I find out I'm pregnant with twins. Hashem.
Whoa,
Crazy.
yay!
Scariest few weeks of my life. I end up doing the cerclage. They stitch me up. I'm like very high risk. I'm going every couple weeks. They're measuring my cervix. They're, doing a million tests and this and whatever. I end up like at 25, 26 weeks, they like notice my cervix starting to like decrease a little bit. So I'm like having heart failure. Obviously, I'm trying to, like not move, take it easy. No,
Not real heart failure. Not real heart failure.
No, I'm like,
please.
I'm like nervous. I'm like trying to take it easy. Right.
Guys,
yes.
now she's exaggerating.
I end up going back at 28 weeks. They're telling me, okay, your cervix is tiny. We're sending you to the hospital. We just want to monitor. We just want to whatever. 28 weeks, I'm in the hospital for 1 week straight because also with the twins, it was like I had to have 2 monitors on me and like they wanted to always clock in like, let's say an hour straight of like the heartbeat without, like hiccups, but a baby would move. I would have to start all over again. It was crazy. One of the sacs was leaking fluid. Okay, drama, whatever. I ended up being in the hospital for a week and I ended up having to have like an emergency C-section at 29 weeks. I was spiking a fever. They were nervous about infection. They're like, we're delivering you. I delivered the twins. They're in the NICU. That's like alive for another time. But it was crazy. And like, I didn't even realize at the time, like how small they were and like how scary it was. I did not even realize because like for me, it was like, oh my God, like these are my babies. Like they're here. Like I knew they were going to be okay. I really did. Like, okay. Yeah.
Okay. You made me cough. Take out my AirPods.
No.
I was scared.
No.
I closed down the whole lot.
So really, thank God it ended like in a very positive way. 8 weeks in the NICU, they came home. They were whatever. I don't even like think of them as preemies anymore. Like they're 5.5. They're delicious and happy and regular, and you don't even realize at the time because like you're so in it and you're looking at it. Like now I go back and I look at pictures and I'm like, why did I think it was okay to send a picture with 800 tubes to my friends? Like this is trauma. Like I can't even look at the pictures,
Because
exactly.
at the time,
Yeah.
that was very real for you, and that
So
was okay.
that's really it for that chapter of my life. A couple of years go by. I ended up pumping and nursing for like 8 months. And then I didn't have a period for like a while. I wasn't thinking my period was like truly the last thing on my head at this point. I want to say after maybe like a year and a couple months, I like go to the bathroom. I'm like, oh my God, is this a period? Like I haven't had a period at this point and I can't tell you how long, like years, So I ended up having a period like almost every month. I wouldn't say it was like regular, but it was more regular than it ever was. Like it was pretty much like a monthly period. I was like, oh my God, like the PCOS corrected itself. Like I was so it was like a big deal for me, After a few years, I remember like a couple years had gone by or whatever. And I remember like, I was just so curious if I was like ovulating. Like I was just like wondering, like, I wonder, like, at this point in my life, like, could I get pregnant on my own? Like, no doctor ever told me, like, you're not able to get pregnant on your own. Like, they never said that to me. It was always just like, we're doing what we have to do. And I always had that goal in mind. So I remember I went back to my doctor for like an annual, and I was like, by the way, like since I'm here, like can we do blood work? Like I'm just so curious. Like I'm getting a period. He's like, yeah, of course. Like come back. I don't know, whatever it was, like the last day of your next period. Let's run some tests. I sit with him, and I'm like, he's like, Sarah, it shows that you ovulated. I'm like, oh my god, that's so nice. It's like I'm so happy. So he was like, maybe if you're thinking about having another kid, like I was thinking about it, but not thinking about it. Like it's hard to like make that decision or whatever when you have two at home and you're working, whatever. He's like, why don't you give yourself maybe like X amount of time, like see if you get pregnant, and if you don't, you'll know for yourself. Like, okay, you had embryos, like you'll go back to the fertility doctor and you'll do what you have to do. I said, okay, very fair. So really for the next, like I would say 6, 7, 8 months, I was actually really for the first time in my life, like not obsessive. I never did ovulation tests. I was not going crazy about it. I wasn't like tracking my period. I was just like happy that I had one. And I kind of just told myself, like, if it's meant to be, it'll happen. If not, I have insurance with my embryos, So X amount of time went back, like passed. I go back to my fertility doctor. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to have another. Twins are like 4 at this point already. They're like, okay, we do IVF again, embryo transfer again. I didn't have to start over because I had embryos. And I go in and thank God I get pregnant on the first try this time. A little bit of a rocky pregnancy, but it's fine. It's all good. I did the cerclage again.
Did you do the cerclage?
They were on top of me, like on top of me. 39 and a half weeks to the point of like, get this baby out of me. Like I remember my doctors every single week telling me, like, Sarah, just get to your 9th month and do whatever you want. Like, we just want you to get to your 9th month. I'm like, okay. Like, every week that went by, it was like, oh my God, okay, surpassed 28 weeks. Like, oh my God, I surpassed 29 weeks. Like, oh my God, 30 weeks. My kids were already 2 weeks old at this age. Like, it was crazy. I got to 39 and a half weeks. Thank God, a million times. I also had a VBAC, which was like a very different experience. Like I was like, they put the baby on me. Like I didn't have that with the twins, like they scooped them up, they took them through the NICU. Right. So it was like so nice that I was really able to experience both and have a full-term baby and also have one baby like after two. Like need to know what everybody with one baby complains about because
your little babies are getting a lot of love in the comments.
Because it's just like a joke I have with my friends. Like, I need to know what people with one baby complain about. Your baby cries and you pick it up, okay? 2 babies cry and it's like, Yes.
Let's go to friends for a second. So what kind of support did you get through IVF?
So I really was very, very lucky. I had amazing, amazing friends. Like, I always had a safe space with them. Like, I was always pretty much like open about it.
Yeah, give them a little shout out.
I know, everyone is really so nice. Like everyone was really, I have to tell you, like so thoughtful, so like knew the right things to say. Like it's not always easy to find the right things to say. And by the way, even when they didn't know the right things to say, it was just like thinking of you, like when's your next appointment? Like everybody was really unbelievable on another level. Like I always had like a group of people that I felt like I could turn to and update. And I had a friend that had gone through IVF like years before. So like, every time there was something, like I would text her and I would say like, I'm doing this protocol tomorrow. Like, like little things. Like I did.
Someone who understands. You have a friend for support and for the day-to-day check-ins, and then you have someone who really
tell you the nicest thing that ever happened to me, and a little bit of the difference of having somebody who went through it versus people that like you telling everything and having to explain everything. Like there is something to be said about like, it's highs and lows on your fertility journey. Like sometimes you're like, in the mood, you want to share, you want to say what you're doing, you want to explain, and like sometimes it's like I don't want to get into what's on Instagram and give you you just don't, like it's draining, So this is like, let's say after I had the loss and after I had the chemical pregnancy, it was like exceptionally hard. Obviously, like I had the emunah, but it's hard. You have very hard days, and this is also like pre-influencer life. There was like this Instagram account, I guess like 8 years ago, whatever it is. And like, I guess she was like an influencer for back in the day. And a lot of people followed her. It was like fashion, whatever. But she would talk about like her family every once in a while. And the thing that she would talk about the most is like her infertility journey. So she was saying how she had two girls, and you know, she did multiple rounds of IVF, and she kept having early miscarriages, and it was like so
Wow.
heartbreaking and whatever. So one day she posts something about the situation, and I'm like 3 in the morning, like reading the comments, like every single comment, like, you know, you just feel like you need it, you know. And I'm like, I was looking,
You
I
were
was like
looking for
in it,
somebody.
right? And I see in the middle of all these randoms and Americans and whatever, I see like a Syrian mom write something like, "You're so brave for sharing your story. I like something along the lines of like, I did IVF to have my own family, and I have 4 beautiful kids because of it. Like, thank you so much." Like something along those lines. And I was like, wow, like this is very brave to be putting this out there. Like, listen, don't like, I was pretty much open with my friends, but I also wasn't like publicizing it in a public forum. Like,
Right. No, eight years ago, it was in
it
our
was.
community, it was still a little bit of a taboo. So people didn't
Yes, and I
offer that
remember like being
information
so inspired,
online.
like, oh my God, I can't believe she's like, this is so crazy. So I screenshot, I send it to my friend. I'm like, do you think it's so crazy? Like if I DM her? She's like, no, like she's writing it, obviously, like, you know,
Mhm.
right.
Right,
So I'm like,
public.
okay, like I'm gonna DM her, you know, like in those hard moments, like you just like crave that support sometimes. So I DM her, I'm like, hi, blah, 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 I read your post. Um, you know, if you want to chat or whatever, she's like, call me, like whatever. Sends me her number. We're on the
Oh,
phone for
wow.
2 hours. She's telling me her whole life story. I'm telling her my whole life story. Like, it was really the nicest thing anybody has just like ever done for me. She always checked. So,
Do you still keep
like
in
on
touch with her?
Instagram, like she'll like pictures, or she'll say something like, "Oh my God, the twins got so big!" Like, you know, like just like little things. Like, I think we never like met in real
Right.
life, but I think like we know each other type. But you don't understand. She checked in on me all the time, like going to an appointment, thinking of you. Like, I always felt like, hi, oh my God, like I'm so nervous. Like, don't worry, honey. Like, it was so special, so unreal, and like just like really, really like inspired me in a way. Like, so like when SB started,
That's
like the
so
peer
nice.
to peer, it's like we needed this. Like, this is like early stages of peer to
Right.
peer, like not
Yes.
even, you know.
Yes.
I always felt
And you're
like it
giving
was like
back
my
now.
obligation to like pass it forward. And something that like really me and my husband always said was like, people were really there for us in like very, very low points. Like even after the miscarriages, like so many people reached out with a wider range of stories, like early losses, late losses, you know, people that like, let's say I grew up with, but like don't talk to on a regular basis, were like telling me their story. And like, I remember being like, oh my God, like how come like nobody talks about this? Like it was
It's so comforting to know that
right.
people I mean,
It
it's a hard thing to say. Like, it's comforting to know that people also experience bad things, but
does.
it does offer you some sort of comfort and
It
support
really
to hear what other
does.
people went through
Men were
when they went through
reaching out to
something
my
that was similar.
husband. Like it was really like unbelievable. And you'll for sure like feel me on this. I feel like when you're newly married, or like let's say those years leading up to marriage, like you're kind of just in a little bubble without realizing of like your close friends. You know, it's like you have your friends, right? Your high
Mhm.
school friends who tell
Your
each
high
other
school friends,
everything.
your
And
high
like,
school friends.
listen, those are
Right.
the friendships that carry you through everything, you know? But because you're limited to each other, it's like you sometimes like don't really like know what else is out there, because like you're always turning to your friends, you know? Then all of a sudden it's like you get married, you have like your husband's friends' wives that become your friends. Then like you have a kid, you have your work friends, then all of a sudden you
Mhm.
have your mom friends, and like every kid comes with like a group of mom friends. All of a
Right.
sudden, like you end up speaking to people and branching out, and you're like, right, like it's
Now
like,
you can
oh,
have
you
your
all had an
fertility
issue,
friends.
like you all have PCOS, or you all took Clomid. Like how come, you know, like know what you don't realize until you kind of like a little bit branch out and see like who else is out there and what else is out there. And everyone really has a story. Like something I always say, like everybody has a story. It's crazy.
So I actually want to ask the
Yeah.
doctor something about your story. We don't want anyone here watching leaving with any type of nerves or fears, because unfortunately Sarah did have some tragedies along her journey. is there any correlation between her weight loss and her chemical pregnancy and her
It's just
PCOS?
tragic. I'm sorry, Sarah, but thank you for sharing.
Not
It's
at
so
all.
inspiring. It really is. No, I don't think the PCOS really had anything to do with the loss. You know, whenever those things happen, we always are just searching for answers to why, and we might not come up with any. But I think there, you know, there is some association with early pregnancy losses and PCOS. A lot of that is sometimes kind of a weight component in there, but the late losses that shorten cervix, oh, it's so tragic.
Yeah.
You know how wanted that pregnancy is, but I don't think it had to, you know, it's not related to the
Yeah.
PCOS.
I did, by the way, when I was pregnant with the twins,
Okay.
I ended up having gestational diabetes, and they did tell
That,
me, they
yeah.
did tell, well,
Okay. So tell us
you know, I
about
wish
that.
I could tell you
That
more,
connects.
but they ended up
Yes.
telling me that I was like diagnosed with it at like 28 weeks, and that was when I was admitted to the hospital, and I delivered it at 29 weeks. Like, so it never really like affected me because, you know, they kind of like sent me to the hospital right away. Once I was in the hospital, actually, they were doing the insulin test on me 3 times a day. But it's just funny because I was like not really eating the hospital food because it was disgusting. So like every time they would come in and tell me like, oh, it's time for blood work, they're like looking at the paper. They're like, you have gestational diabetes? Like it shows here, but like you're totally fine. I'm like, I mean, right, I haven't really
Yeah.
Have
eaten and I'm kind of
eaten
like
it.
You
in the
took
middle of the
lifestyle
Yeah.
changes
crisis.
to the extreme.
Right.
Yeah.
But when I was pregnant with my baby last year, I was at a higher risk and I did fail the glucose test the first time. And I had to do the
I
three
felt it the
hour
first
and
time
you can
too.
literally ask every single, I was like, I'm not testing positive for this. I was eating like almond butter on a spoon for like 2 weeks. Like I was mental. Like I was like, I will not have gestational diabetes with this.
By the way, asking a pregnant person to fast for 3 hours is not nice. Not
I kept like
nice.
telling everyone
Not
I'm gonna
okay.
trick the system. They're like, no, but if you really have it, like you have to be careful. I'm like, no, I'm
I
not.
like ran up the stairs before mine. I was like, I'm getting all this
Right.
energy out. I'm trying to.
And I ended up passing the 3 hour test, so it worked.
I want to ask Dr. Tarosi, I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
And then I want to get to the Q&A. We're going on an hour and I want to get to everybody's questions. But the last question I want to ask you is, do you feel PCOS is
I think it's
overdiagnosed?
over and underdiagnosed. I worry about that diagnosis in the adolescent, like we're talking about before, because like there's so many overlapping symptoms, and I never want them to have to carry on diagnosis throughout their life that they are always thinking, I'm going to have trouble with XYZ. So I think there's some overdiagnosis maybe in that kind of population. But then on the flip side, I also see so many patients who are bounced around to different physicians. They see their GYN for their irregular periods, their dermatologist for their facial hair, their like PCP for their diabetes, and no one's like put it together for them and kind of told them how this all could be related. So I think there is, you know, a lot of learning that needs to, you know, go on out there. So it's so nice that you guys are doing something like this to kind of talk about it. So I think some people might be a little bit overdiagnosed, but I also think there's a lot of people who have it who don't really know about it.
Right. Well, I was one of those people that doctor hopped. So this was, I wish I heard this, 15 years ago. Okay, so let's get to the Q&A. Let's see what we have here. Let's go here. Is someone more likely to have a high-risk pregnancy if they're diagnosed with PCOS?
I did
you guys
that one,
see it,
yeah.
right? I don't have to read it?
So
Okay.
just like Sarah was kind of saying,
Okay.
there are certain complications that you're at higher risk for. So it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to have diabetes or gestational diabetes, so diabetes when you're pregnant, but there's a higher risk that you might. Also, if you have twins, also is going to increase the risk. So Sarah, I think you just had multiple risk factors going on there. And higher blood pressure is another big thing too. So having PCOS does increase your risk for those kind of complications like the higher blood pressure, diabetes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have it either.
Okay, so let's go here.
So if you're ovulating, do you still need medicine to conceive? That's a great question. So if you're ovulating, then you're releasing the egg. if you're ovulating, first you need to know when that's happening because it's kind of hard to have sex like every day. So first, are you ovulating on a regular basis that you'll know when those days are that you should have sex? So that's, first kind of key to getting pregnant. If you are regulating, if you're regular ovulating, having sex during that fertile window, then you might not need any medications then to conceive from there.
Okay, hold on. Oh, let's look at this one. We didn't talk about this.
Aren't other symptoms in adolescence dark skin spots and hair loss? So I think when you're talking about the dark skin spots, like acanthus nigrans is kind of the medical term that they talk about, but it's really showing signs of insulin resistance, not just in adolescents, but in all people. So there are different kind of skin thing findings that we can show us that might mean that you're having that insulin resistance and a higher risk for diabetes. Hair loss is another thing that people talk about as far as like the if you have higher testosterone, you actually can sometimes then get facial hair and hair loss on the head, which is just so frustrating because like, why does that happen? But it's basically same thing that happens to males that have facial hair, but hair loss on the head. So it is, hair loss can be a sign of having extra testosterone.
This is a cute one. Let's go here. I think she's referring to the ovulation
okay,
sticks.
so if the ovulation sticks don't work, what can you use? So first off, they're going to work for some people, but just not for everybody. So if you're somebody, you're using them and you get negatives, but then all of a sudden one time in the month you get a positive and then it becomes negative again, it's probably working for you. So if that was the case where it's negative and then becomes positive, that means it's probably working. Really what you should be doing is have a fertility person like me that you're talking to, because we can do ultrasounds and blood work, which is much more specific. And so then that's helpful sometimes to really kind of pinpoint when you're ovulating.
Okay.
Is there a connection between PCOS and hypothyroidism? Not really. So PCOS, it's a hormonal disease, and hypothyroidism is also hormones with your thyroid. It is something that we want to check your thyroid levels before we give a diagnosis of PCOS, because let's say you come in with irregular periods. I'm trying to figure out, why are your periods not regular? It could be your thyroid issues, so that's why we can check those thyroid levels, or it could also be that PCOS hormonal issues from the extra testosterone.
Okay, just a second. Let's get one for Sarah. Sarah.
How did you tell friends and family about, I guess, like the fertility thing? So in general, like I said, I'm always like, I'm pretty much more of an open person. I was never really like, listen, it's awkward, but I'll say another thing also, by the way. So I was a senior in high school when my little brother was born. Okay. And I know it sounds crazy, but because I was like older, I kind of like, I was not unaware to like, let's say fertility or different things. And like my friends all like, it's like my childhood friends. So like they knew about my brother, it was like, I can't explain. So like really when it was my turn to like start and trying, it was like, okay, like I'm having issues. Like I went to a fertility doctor. Like I guess maybe because like my friends really like knew me and knew that it was like funny that I had a brother like as a senior. It wasn't like crazy that I was saying this. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense.
Open.
It wasn't so easy. Like it wasn't an easy thing to be like, this is the story. But like I said, I guess I've always been transparent with close friends. I mean, there's definitely random people that it's like a little bit harder to be so transparent with, and like you kind of have to like do the whole, oh, we just got married, we're busy, we're so busy, like we want to travel. It's like annoying, but you say those things because it's weird, like it's awkward, it's weird, like what do you want me to say?
It's
like
weird.
But I always had a safe, like I really always had a safe space with close friends, and they really always knew like what was going on.
Sarah, you didn't tell everyone you were having twins.
I told maybe 3 people. I was so scared. Like it really stemmed just from being terrified more than anything. And it was so nice to give everyone that surprise. Like the reactions were really like so nice and so special. And it's funny now, well, like it's easy to make fun of it now, but like such a thing that people would say to me and still say to me is like, "Oh my God, you have twins? Oh my God, so they're in your family and are they natural?" And it's like, guys, does it matter? Like what, like again, like
No, it
I
doesn't
happen to be more
matter.
open, but like I'm not gonna give every person my life story. So it's like you find yourself like not lying. I was like, yeah, I have twins in the family, which there are, like are they all natural? Probably not, but they're there. So it's just like a weird thing. Like I feel like it's important for me to say that people should be just like a little bit sensitive to it, and
Yes,
I also realize like I
yes.
kind of look at it through the lens of like people just really don't know. Like I don't think when people ask, they're saying it in a way of like meaning harm. I just think they really don't know better, and it's like maybe like a conversation starter like about twins, but it's really just
Right.
something to be conscious of because like again like I'm pretty open, but like I know it was hard for me to hear that, like Kal Vachomer people that don't want to talk about it, or don't feel comfortable opening up. Like I can imagine how
Right.
horrible it is for that, like for them.
Right. And I feel like we all at this point know someone who didn't announce that they were having twins. And you hear people saying like, "Oh,
Yeah.
why didn't they tell us they were having twins? Who
Scary,
cares?" But
very
this,
scary.
I mean, Sarah's story shows you that you don't know the backstory and why people keep things quiet. And some people are just
Yeah,
naturally private and some people are private for a reason. And
yeah.
for whatever reason you choose to
There's
keep private,
definitely like a
that's
stigma
you
around like,
and a
oh,
decision.
she didn't say she was having twins. There's definitely like all the twin moms
Hmm.
know that there's definitely a thing of it. Like there's definitely that weirdness about it. And it's like
And
if
people
only
have different reactions when they find out themselves they have twins. Like some people are super excited, some people are not super excited initially because it's a lot of work.
yeah.
Like, so I think all of those
I
reactions
would
are
be
Yeah.
normal. Like
scared,
sometimes
by
you
the way.
don't,
I would be very
you aren't
scared.
ready to let everybody else in. And
Yeah. Just it was just like
Right.
fear, honestly, over like I was just so scared every day.
Mhm.
Okay. This one was a good one.
Is PCOS genetic? I definitely think there is a genetic component. I kind of think of it like diabetes and hypertension, which is also complex diseases where there is a genetic component. So you see families where there is more PCOS in families. So I think it is something, there's genetic there, but it's not like a gene that we can isolate and say this is why you have
Okay.
it. Mhm.
So like if your mom, sorry, I'm looking for the next question, but I also want to ask you. So like if your mom or if it runs in your family, there's not really a reason to be
No, just, yeah,
alarmed,
it's
like,
nice sometimes,
right?
if it is in the family, people are talking about their symptoms then maybe more. So then sometimes you also are kind of quicker to get diagnosed because you go to the doctor quicker. And so
Right.
it's not something to be alarmed for, but it is something to kind of, what symptoms to kind of look out for. But same thing like diabetes or hypertension. Just because your mom has diabetes doesn't mean that you're going to get diabetes. But if it runs in the family, there's a higher risk then.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I posted the next
What's
one
the
for you.
connection between PCOS and AMH levels? It's a good question. So AMH stands for anti-Müllerian hormone, which is a hormone that's made from the follicles. So if you could imagine your PCOS ovary that has a lot of follicles, because again, that's what PCOS is, lots of follicles. You have lots of follicles, they're going to be making lots of AMH then. So typically when you have PCOS, we're seeing higher AMH levels in PCOS. It is going to be something that's really just tested in the fertility world because this is how we kind of can tell you about your fertility and what type of medications to use and the dosages and things. So I think your standard GYN probably isn't measuring your AMH to diagnose PCOS, but if you are having fertility issues, we're definitely probably going to measure your AMH level, and usually we see a higher AMH levels with PCOS.
Okay. So there's a few more questions. Some of them are like a little personal. I'm not going to post them on the screen. And some I were definitely answered. They were probably questions from earlier on. But again, guys, if there's something that we didn't answer because it is personal, you know where to find us. You know how to reach us. We'd love to answer your personal questions. There was a few questions about doctor recommendations. That's also something we could help you with just by learning a little bit more about what's going on. So please reach out. I wanted to talk to you about one more thing, guys, and I'm going to let you go 1 more minute because Sarah and I discussed this on the phone. Google, okay?
I have things
We didn't
to
talk
say about it.
Okay. Okay, well, we're going to make it
That's fine.
fast. We're going to make it fast because we're losing our viewers. Sarah Googles, and so do I. We Google everything. We're just that type, and we know as a doctor, you probably say we shouldn't because Google tells you you have cancer and you're going to drop dead. But for us type of people who do like to read up and try to educate and advocate for ourselves, can you recommend some maybe some good websites that have accurate information if people want to read up more on PCOS and learn more about
anybody, even doctors, we Google things too when it's our own medical things that are going on. So like it's gonna happen, and I get that. My first thing or the last thing I always tell patients when I meet them is I give them my email and I say, use me like Google. Don't type this into Google. Like type it into an email into me, and like I'm gonna respond. I'm not instantaneous like Google is, but like 24 hours later, let me answer this question and not Google from there. So, have some kind of doctor that you can trust and ask questions to. That's, I think the most important. Out there are good websites and good kind of patient resources. The American Society of Reproductive Medicine has like their own kind of like patient side too. There's also like their doctor side, but patient side too, where they have some good information about PCOS where you can learn about it too.
Okay. We have to be realistic.
Exactly.
Don't tell me not to Google something. I'm going to Google it.
You're gonna do it, but then come back to me and let me, put me down to earth and like this is, what's probably gonna
have to get it out of your system sometimes,
Yeah, it's the 3 a.m. I'm not responding back.
That's
right away.
exactly.
So, like, it's gonna happen.
That's very helpful that you do offer that to your patients to email you questions. That's a great resource. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you everybody for watching and tuning in and sticking with us for an hour and 20 minutes. If there's anything we didn't answer, you know where to find us.
I was gonna say you can give out my
Dr.
email. That's
Rossi,
fine.
Right?
I won't give medical advice until you're my patient.
Okay,
but then come be my patient, and I will happy to treat you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us, and we'll hopefully save the lives. Send it to your friends if you know anybody might benefit from the information we shared.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.